this is the Endeavor Archetype. We rode this with Union Atlas, Adidas Tactical ADVs, Union Falcors, and Union Stratas. I even think I got some Solomon Defenders on these guys. And to give you a quick summary, I would say it's the non-swallowtail swallowtail. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yes.
You see the swallowtail and you think super surfy, super off the tail. Then you get on it and you realize it's not that. And then you don't get bummed though. You get kind of stoked because on groomers, this thing carves like it's not a swallowtail. This thing really like feels more centered in powder than you would think for what it is. You just see all this, all this tail and all this cut. Yeah. Yeah. But anyways, you think that you have this like really surfy off the tail ride, and you really have more of a centered board that has its own personality, but has that same kind of like launch it kind of off the tail kind of feel as the Scout and the Maverick. And of all the boards in the powder quiver, this was my personal favorite because it just did a little bit of everything in every condition well, and I really like that. But let's get into the pop. Does anybody want to do the honors and flex this? Do you want to get into that, Nick?
Flex it. I didn't ride this board, but I'll flex this board.
Nick came for the Scout and stayed for the Archetype.
Did not feel super stiff to me.
That's what she said.
Yeah. Multiple times.
Yeah. But anyways, as like Grant goes into like this.
And moving on silence. To where are we? Camber profile.
Yeah, but you could butter off the tail. Camber profile though, it's got that like check the on the table review below. It's got that little bit of early rise, very mellow, very just mellow early rise that they call hover camber. But this board is more on the technical advanced to expert side. It's definitely kind of semi locked in. But it 1 foots and flat bases and tracks really well. But it's got that like super tapered look on specs. Like you see 22 mil of taper.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's a lot. This should be super surfy, a lot of back weight on the tail. But in actuality, it doesn't feel as tapered as you'd think,
And that could have to do with, like we were talking about the way different companies, measure their side cut radius. Like, where does it start?
Yeah.
Right?
Like yeah, where you play with the side cut. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's,
But, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it has, like, some of that, like, that cool side cut radius tech, like Burton has.
Yeah.
That makes tapered boards feel less tapered on groomers, but then you get into powder and then you feel that 22 mil of taper.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty cool.
With that taper, waist width published is 26.0 and
28.6.
Yeah, so I had issues with that width on my back foot, which didn't make it the best carver for me.
Yeah.
But James was loving it.
I was loving it with my size 9s.
Yeah, and it's a cool board. I'd like to ride the wide version.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's...
But that's the thing. It's like a lot of people look at the waist width and think that's the end all.
Including myself.
Yeah, and with a twin, that's fine. But when you're looking at a taper board, be careful about the tail.
Especially when there's this much taper. This is a lot of taper.
Yeah, and we're at a time where there are a lot of tapered boards. And really tapered. Let's get to edge hold real quick. I thought the edge hold was really good, really competent. Yeah.
That's what you get with camber.
Yeah.
You get some edge hold, consistency.
I gotta say, it gripped well. It gripped a little better than I thought it would grip. for what it was.
Yeah.
And hard snow turns were good. Definitely not like a snowment ice specialist, but definitely can hang in snowment and just really like, you have to dial back your turns a little bit, but it really engages and does a good job turning. And the turning experience with this, for me personally, this just meshed super well with my specs. I loved how this just sprung out of a turn and really just drove down the mountain. And it had a much more centered feel than you would think. Just like in powder, on groomers, these tails just like held.
And they've got this board has the carbon beam construction.
That must be it.
So it's a little more pricey.
Yeah.
But it's got that.
It's got that
stiffness,
lively spring, and I just
a lot of pop.
This was my favorite. I never would have guessed this looking at the boards online before I rode these. I would have thought like the Maverick or the Scout would have been my favorite carvers. This was my favorite. I really liked this.
And I was the opposite. I didn't dislike this board, but you pulled up we met at the mountain. You had all the Endeavors in the car, and I grabbed this one immediately because I saw the Swallowtail, and I thought this is going to be my favorite one. Typically favor stiff, swallowtailed, cambered boards for carving. And it wasn't my favorite based on my specs, but
you like the wider
some people
tail
would
of the Scout
really
better.
Some people
the
would
Scout
really
was
like
your
this.
board.
Yes. Of the boards that we got from Endeavor, the Scout was the best, but I would love to ride this in 160 wide.
Yeah, and
I could enjoy it.
And for me, this was the best.
Right.
And I loved how this narrower tail worked with my size 9s. So this 26 waist and wider nose didn't feel as wide, and it just really just jammed down the hill for me.
Were you riding a posi stance with this, or what were you?
No, I rode like 0 and -3.
Okay.
And then usually around 21 in the front.
So still pretty aggressive, but yeah.
Yeah, more
directional.
More on this end.
Yeah.
But I just really loved that, and it just had that nice, like almost centered feel. It was definitely a little more back foot heavy on the carves, but it had this just really cool centered feel. And in powder, this thing floated really well, but I will say, like, one day I rode it in powder, and it floated like a champ. The next day I took it out and compared it to a couple different, like, really amazing powder boards. Like, what was I on that day?
The Dart or the Mind Expander?
I was on the Dart. I was on...
That's tough competition.
Yeah. That thing's like way more taper, way more rocker, much wider nose.
Huge nose.
Yeah. And then I rode the elevated red tail, which is just super fat and wide.
Yeah.
And that one, it seemed like it was very floaty. And then I got on a couple more powder boards, like the Rome Powder Division, and then I got on this after that, and all those boards were so far back on the tail and so just floaty that I was actually standing centered, and they were floating. And then I got on this and stood like I did on those boards.
You sit all the way back?
All the way back.
Yeah.
And I stood like I did on those boards, and I cartwilled.
But that was a heavy day, though, I think, if I remember correctly.
It was really
thick,
thick,
heavy,
super thick, wet snow.
Yeah.
And
you must have been sleeping in.
And then I realized, yes, you were. And then I realized that this board it's definitely really good in powder, but it likes a little bit more back foot weight and needs a little more attention.
TLC.
Yeah. But it's not a bad powder board at all.
Yeah, and if you're someone who doesn't get a lot of powder days and you want a swallowtail style carving board,
if you want to get
with a lot of pop,
swallowtail,
then when there is powder, you can set this way back because it's got the channel system, and with non-EST bindings, you can go super far back. So I mean, you could if you're a large binding, you might even be pushing it all the way here.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's one advantage of the channel system.
But this is one of the only swallowtails I would feel comfortable launching on a big kicker with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, or
Stiff and
launching
rigid.
off of like a bigger,
Yeah.
like if just you made some wrong, like at my age, I made some wrong turns. Okay. All I have left is this like 15-foot drop to get home.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad I'm on the,
You're gonna go with this guy.
glad I'm on the Archetype.
Yeah.
You know, but, or that occasional kicker you want to hit. Most swallowtails just shit the bed when you're in the air. You know what I mean? They just
You got to be on your game.
just land
Yeah.
so poorly. This is really fun if you want to launch it.
Even if the dart, you got to be on your game. Like,
I would 10 times out of 10
Yeah.
take this over the dart when
Yeah.
it comes to airtime. You know, but there you go.
Yeah.
That's the Archetype. Conflicted opinions, but based, I think, mainly on boot size.
that's it.
Yeah.
Size matters.
Looking forward to trying out the 160 wide in this.